Slightly louder.
Yeah,
Slightly louder, Robert, please.
yeah. Talk like Siri.
Like, oops,
Okay.
Siri.
Having settled the sound system, dealt with the technological problem. Greetings to all of you. Happy Valentine's Day. We'll get back to that a little later. The question is, why are we here on Valentine's Day? I propose to answer that. I dropped onto the table a little Valentine, this total side project not related to Russ's book. So that's available as a handout, courtesy of Nietzsche. I think we have 43 to 45 people or so, so we have a perfectly full house. The camera back there is taking a video of the entire thing, which the library will put up. So you go to it, you'll be able, in some period of time, I don't think they're going to edit it, they just put them up. They're starting to place all these videos for events in this room where you can see it again. And what you do is on the library website, howtogointhelibrary.org probably, you navigate around till you find a place that says YouTube. It's a YouTube video, they have a YouTube channel. And once you're there, you'll be able to get it if you want to look at it again. So you all have implicitly given permission to have the backs of your heads seeing it. A couple of minor housekeeping details are that around the corner there's water just near the front door. Through the door beyond that there's bathrooms. We'd like to have you all have your phones silenced. And Russ is fine about being photographed, videoed, but prefers not to have flashes. That's really distracting. Most phones probably won't need them anyway. I'm going to read an introduction to Russ and to his book because I've learned, as Donald Trump has not, that it's dangerous to go off script. It's very dangerous for me. I get to 3 minutes giving some testimony to the supervisors in shock. I'm only halfway through. So I've sort of learned about that. But I don't have that time at the moment, and I have a lot of thoughts about Russ. I want to present fairly completely a picture of him. And then talk a little bit about the book and even specifics about the language. So this is not normal stuff you're about to hear. Some of the thoughts that I'll be reading are in the February edition of Patagonia Regional Times under the title of Verse Against the Machine, and there's a few handouts of that piece on this end of the table also that you can pick up afterwards if you're interested. But you should be reading the paper itself. Any gathering of humans could start out greetings earthlings, but in the borderlands, thanks to Russ's linguistic invention, we're now able to say greetings borderlings. So that's what's offered to you at the moment. But it's important to remember that everything that breathes and lives around here is also a borderling. Even your gut biome. All borderlings is a really broad word. And I belabor this because he's introducing a new word into the language here. So you should practice it. Everybody say borderling.
Borderlings.
It's pretty easy to decipher this word because ling is a familiar suffix in words like yearling or sapling or underling. So we know. And all these creatures in the indigenous world, in the borders here, that are borderlings, are our relatives. This is important not to forget also. And at the beginning, by way of land acknowledgement, I was inspired by Russ's remarks at an event at the border wall on the 15th of November, which is 3 months ago. So the year has turned 1 quarter, if you like fractions. It was called Rally for the Valley, and I'll refer to it because it was a significant event in my world. It was a powerful awareness of that exact place and its ecology. And I viewed that event, that rally, as a weaving of ceremony and activism. Russ was the first speaker at that rally, and he oriented us all to the mountain ranges, watersheds, and wildlife, right where we were standing. We're all standing within 60 feet of the border, about 150, 180 people on that order. They come from all kinds of places to the very furthest corner from here of San Rafael Valley. It takes 2 hours to get there from Patagonia. It struck me at the time that Russ's orientation was really a part of becoming indigenous to place. And this is a phrase that comes from Robin Wall Kimmerer's pretty well-known book, Raiding Sweetgrass. She read from that here in 2019 in this library and became known to some of us, and her book has been quite influential. What she means by it is you as an experienced person living and functioning in a place, moving around, what do you detect? What do you penetrate of that place? What do you know of it? What do you know of what parts of it sustain you at every level, including? So there is a version of it there that he was touching on in his opening remarks at the rally, which included talking about the 2 mountain ranges. I can kind of do the choreography. We're standing back to the wall, Huachuca Mountains, here. I think I'm in the right range. And over through the valley to the Patagonias. On the Sonora side, what you mentioned was creatures, because it isn't just the geography, the topography. To become indigenous to the place, you have to know the creatures. This is what naturalists do. So what that means is that Robin Wall Kimmerer's vision of becoming indigenous to place can apply anywhere that you are. So my question of myself was, as an explorer of this area for 10 years intensively Patagonia, 30 years Southern Arizona, what do I know about this exact place? What can I tell you about being indigenous here? Probably have to do a little more choreography. And at the border, if I can even get myself oriented. At the border, we were facing directly south, so the dominant thing on the compass was east-west knife-like piece of the border. Just laid out like a guillotine blade is what that thing, as it developed, looks like to me. That's a compass orientation, so everything was in relationship to that. Here, when they laid out the long streets of Patagonia, which are parallel to this wall, that's about 38 degrees off of true east, north of east. So that means true east is 38 degrees this way. So this is east, 90 degrees around is north, 28 more degrees takes you to Wrightson, which is a key axis of our orientation and places us on the planet from Patagonia. 90 more degrees gets to west, and that's where the setting sun passes through at the equinox on its way to the northern part of its sunset period. That's also 28 degrees either way. So you have a 56 degree span of the sunset from here, which is about like this. And that in turn means 90 more degrees straight south. You can always find that with your instrument that you bring with you, the body, by looking to see where your shadow is going at solar noon, which is not quite the same as real noon. So there's some sloppiness in that measurement, but that's the thing you can always do if the sun is shining. As for the creatures that are here that are unique right around this area, we've gone for a long time about the birds, of course. One set of them that interested me happened across the street in a kind of interesting event last spring that involved both plants and creatures. The Duquesne house was having its porch crunched by a big pine tree. They decided to cut it down. They brought some pros with a crane, sectioned it, lifted it up, took it away. So that was a dealing with the plant. That was humans dealing with the plant. But on the way down the trunk, they found a nest of ravens. There was a pair, ones with their feathers about ready to fly, another wing were fledgling. So the crane guys took this nest of ravens, the two of them. The parents had fled and were squawking in nearby trees and pretty unhappy at all this destruction. They took them carefully and gingerly around to the back, which has tons of trees, and managed to relocate them in a way they could finish their growing up. So it was a wildlife rescue. So that's a quality of this exact place that happened right across the street. In terms of plants, we have oddball indigenous, non-indigenous stuff. Lilacs across the street, two in the back courtyard there that produce all kinds of butterflies. You have palms at Dos Palmas, two of them, another palm shortly up the street. And you could go on and on with the plants. You could go down the street and find rosemary on each side. Well, all that makes for this unique, very Patagonia indigeneity, if you will. As for animals, I didn't really complete what I was going to say there. This spot happens to be on a javelina route. Right past the building in order to forage in this alley or go across to the park. So that's a scene, but that's the unique thing about this exact spot. And I encourage everybody to sort of live in that way. Russ's orientation to the site at the rally involved a little more talk about the animals that were in various directions, because the issue there is that knife-like wall slices an ecosystem, slices migratory patterns. So that was a feature that dominated all of us in a certain way. One thing I forgot here, Russ explained that at the border wall location we were for that rally, the water kind of divides. We were talking about this earlier. The water divides into what goes into the Santa Cruz River, and like the Santa Cruz River, other waters flow east, hook around, and become tributaries of San Pedro. So it was a watershed moment in a watershed place. Not easy to perceive in that site because it's all kinds of fingers or bridges. But it's yet another part of the awareness. Watershed awareness is absolutely key at all times. Here in Patagonia, what happens here is this floor level is not terribly different from the street. It's a little bit up. It survives the floods. The waters here are headed down off the foothills to the southwest of the tributary to Sonoyta Creek. That's the surface water. Underneath water is really pretty interesting. You don't think about it much, but down through the slab here, we get to gravels, soil and gravel, that range up to 400 feet in depth, filling the cleft between the two mountain ranges. That becomes a sponge for our aquifer. So it's a little hard to envision, but right down through about 17 feet of this soil and gravel, there is the top of a deep aquifer that serves Patagonia. You don't think of it like you're sitting on top of the wall. And the reason I know that is that down 4th Avenue, probably 100 yards from here, Doug Potter, owner of that stucco house, took me out to see his well one time. Hand-dug well, 3 feet in diameter. Looked at it, there's a lens of water. So I said, Doug, you're a builder, we need tape. We got the tape down 17 feet to the aquifer. So that water is 17 feet here. The town gets its water on the other side of Sonoyta Creek at about 30 to 40 feet. We could go on, the sewage treatment plant 60 feet. So the water is right here. And this place used to be a swamp with early miners having trouble with malaria. So that's all a part of the knowledge of this exact spot. For animals here, I forgot one story, which is that I was talking to a neighbor about 5 or 7 years ago. I can't place it pre-pandemic or not. This guy told me he'd seen a jaguar here. I mentioned jaguar because it's supposed to be his favorite animal to be monitored, and it's made lots of contributions to our understanding of them. this guy said he'd seen a jaguar. He was out drinking whiskey after his mom died on the cemetery trail, which is about a quarter mile from here. He saw a jaguar. Well, it's not a very credible sighting. No wildlife cam pictures. The guy turns out to be a drug addict. So his testimony is not credible, and you should forget that story. No jaguar sighted on the cemetery trail. That's a bit of orientation to our moment and place of uniqueness. Our body, as I mentioned, is the main instrument. We could do quite a lot with that experientially right here by way of energy. We've had the compass is a circle that spreads around. You know, I'm doing this choreography right, I'm the compass point. Getting bearings, getting your bearings has become a phrase for becoming oriented, getting squared away, getting bearings. And bearing is the angle relative to something that you're looking at, considering a line of sight or property line or whatever. So the thing that balances that off is the vertical axis. This is where the energy part comes in. I think if you thought about it, there's a couple references to this in some of the poems. The vertical axis is gravity holding us to the ground, right? If you put your feet down flat on the floor, you feel some of that gravity. You feel it on your sits bones. You feel it where your elbow touches something. That's one of those many invisible forces operating on us. It's within our perception. And that's part of an axis to the center of the earth. It goes high into the dome of the skies, and it passes through your 7 chakras. So there's an energetic component of this. It also is that you take with you in your instrument, your perceiving instrument. That said, I'd like to orient you to Russ himself and to the book. We'll start with bio, short biography. Bio is a Greek root that stands for life and gets all kinds of stuff attached to it, like biochemistry. It's often convenient to call a person one thing, a nurse, a rancher, or a grandparent, for example. We all do it, it's convenient. About 3 years ago, Russ and I were passengers on a small Cessna Eco-Flight for purposes of seeing what was then current mine construction by Copper World and Hermosa Project. So we got to fly over all this stuff. At that time, I'm looking over his shoulder as he's taking pictures on the right-hand side because it was a clockwise flight, so the pilot tips the wing a little bit so you can see down on the right. So I'm looking over his shoulder. And I at first thought of him as a conservation ecologist, but I've come to know him since as a passionate explorer, which I aspire to, an activist in the borderlands, and more recently as also a parent and poet. He is a whole person, empathic and multi-talented. Fortunately, he will not fit in a single box, but he has roots in science, activism, and poetry. So analytically, let's look at each of these 3 parts of Russ. As a scientist, his master's in environmental history had included principles of ecology, which he's deepened with extensive field work in Florida and the Sky Islands area, Sky Islands/borderland region of Sonora and Arizona, both sides of the border. In Florida, Russ was head of the Earth First Journal. And since 1912, wrong century. Since 2012, he's worked with a prominent national group, Center for Biological Diversity, also known as CBD around here. Don't confuse it with the other meaning of CBD. As in the position of Southwest Conservation Advocate, which allows him to roam a bit, which he likes. Working with colleagues and groups in this region, his bottomless natural curiosity about all of life is joined with scientific tools and systems thinking in the service of conservation. There's a connection also to legal work. For several environmental lawsuits, Russ has been able to provide scientific fact-based backup. It's really important. Facts are an exchangeable commodity. The most prominent case locally that I know of is the July 2025 CBD lawsuit of the Department of Homeland Security. It challenges the federal waiver of over 30 environmental regulations to facilitate construction of the border wall across San Rafael Valley and through mountains on either side. Russ could fill us in on perhaps its movement forward. As an activist, part two, Russ traces his environmental justice roots to West Virginia, where as a kid in the coal fields, his great-grandfather had died of black lung disease. It's no surprise that environmental justice has been a theme of much of his activism running solidly through his multifaceted career. He's been in research and campaigns relating to biodiversity, iconic species, jaguar being his favorite, as I mentioned, watershed and wildlife corridor preservation, binational cultural significance of the borderlands, environmental education, container wall resistance, and impacts of border wall construction. This is a busy guy. However, here's an aside. If you look up the meaning of the name McSpadden, it's an Irish name, which means person who is lethargic. Not aptly named, I consider it a name.
That's an incorrect. It's Scottish, and it means son of shovel. Son of a shade. Son of a spade.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yes. Yeah, son of a spade.
Okay, thank you for straightening me out.
Well, Mick and Scott gave his son of.
Not S-U-N.
Oh yeah, not S-U-N, yeah, right.
Shovel.
Yeah.
As a writer, Russ has always been drawn to poetry as a way of finding deep emotional answers that other approaches can't. I put him in the camp of Albert Einstein, who said, "Everything I've learned has not been through my rational mind." With these poems, he joins a long history of American letters of passionate activists/writers attempting to make sense of the powerful wildness of the West as it meets capitalist development's rapacious appetites for land, water, and minerals. That's a clash of many facets. In the early years of the Earth First Journal, he edited and wrote the magazine. One piece covered an erotic reframing of environmentalism, which was called ecosexuality, founded by two women. And the goal of ecosexuality, he wrote in the piece about it, is to experiment with a metaphorical shift from Earth as mother to Earth as lover. That led to a series of performances such as marriages to a coal mine. And I don't know where they are now. You might be able to update us about that too. The women made a documentary, which is called Brawley Mountain, an ecosexual love story. And about that documentary, Russ wrote, "This is the sexiest nature documentary and one of the most profound films to deal with the beauty and tragedy of the Appalachian Mountains in the age of King Coal." And it was an interesting bit. Russ has made contributions to numerous environmental publications and podcasts. Writers are generally also speakers, and he's frequently interviewed by local media and reporters. In both writing and speaking, during what a biographer would call the Arizona years, Russ's passion for life and living in the desert always shines through. I suspect desert rat is a positive term in Russ's vocabulary. Utah author Terry Tempest Williams, who has a book I found there, lays out the bare-bone intensity of personal involvement with the desert. She says, "I want to keep my words wild, so that even if the land and everything we hold dear is destroyed by short-sightedness and greed, there's a record of beauty and passionate participation by those who saw what was coming." I would assert that Russ sees what is coming and is powerfully contributing to just such a record. In a poem called "The Poetry of Satellites," he uses a phrase that caught my ear and applies to the entire book: the cosmos of hidden things. Now let's consider the book itself. Last October, the Tucson Small Press Art Speak released Russ's first book of poems, which is very close to available right there in a pile. 51 of them, I think. And it was introduced by Logan Phillips, who is in Tucson, and who also has written extensively about the border and done performances in his particular art fashion, and he's not in this crowd at the moment. On ArtSpeak Press's website, you can find a shop section, what they call shop, the merch, so to speak. It has 2 short videos of Russ reading, so after hearing them, you might like to go to that. He also has a video called The Watering Hole on YouTube. I'm not quite sure how to find that. You can tell us. Patagonia Regional Times February issue has an article on it as well, which I mentioned, sitting on the table. Border author Sarah Towell, which is like towel to dry your back with, but the 2 last letters of her, T-O-W-L-E, will be here next month. I don't know quite what we're going to get to do with it. She's interesting. She has a podcast and other features on her Substack, which is called Tales for Humanity. So she's a literate user of the Substack platform who's very familiar with borders and has done an extensive history of the exact things that happen along the Texas borders, starting with migrant surges several years ago. Oh, okay. I need to speed along. I want to quote Russ about the wall, since a good deal of what we're referring to is the wall here. At the rally, he said, "This wall is a manifestation of small-minded paranoia, fear-mongering, and authoritarianism. This symptom of a paranoid empire gasping for control. Because places like this valley are freedom incarnate, a true Wild West, authoritarians require it to be walled, a deep and existential wound on the planet, and a wound in our hearts." That's a transition, to summarize another page, to the point that these poems address the wound at both planetary and personal levels. And that's quite important to face that. That is why these pieces are not Arizona Highways, Hallmark, Reader's Digest, whatever. They are challenging and can take some emotional intensity. So I'm basically trying to prepare you for that. An entry into what mythologist Michael Meade and others call the shadow work on yourself. You don't just coast through and get entertained. Okay. One of the things I wanted to say about language is a German word that Russ discovered, Mauerkrankheit, a post-World War II psychological condition of wall sickness. That's very interesting thing to know about. But in the overall flow of words, don't expect rhymes or complete sentences. There's occasional conventional punctuation, but a shortness of commas and especially periods. In reading, you'll be washed over by and listening. You'll be washed over by associations and innuendos. You'll be listening to both the pain and the love of the empath, the guy who cares so deeply that it hurts. He knows that you do not destroy something you love, and this is why we are here on Valentine's Day.